The Houston Cougars face a new opponent this weekend and a bit of a homecoming that Starns is on to help us break down.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Parker Ainsworth, and I'm joined today by sports editor of the Daily Cougar, GoCoogs own Starns Leland, to help talk about the homecoming for the Sampsons in Norman, Oklahoma. Starns wrote about this. We'll get into that article in a minute. But Starns, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing good. I just got out of the shower. I'm a little out of sorts, but I'm happy to be here.
Well, for a college-age kid, getting out of the shower, and I mean, you're going out tonight. What's the plan there?
Oh no, I'm going to bed. I don't got nothing going on. I'm dealing with a little bit of a cold. I don't want to push it.
Gotcha. Well, obviously, appreciate you coming on to talk to us because I think everyone has put together that this weekend, Sampson, and then also Quannas and Hollis are all going back to Norman, Oklahoma. Coach Kelvin was there for a long time. Successful building of a program, Final Four, Elite Eight. You wrote about this and got to talk to them each a little bit about what it's like to head back. First of all, when did you know that was going to be your piece to write? Was it when the schedule came out? I mean, what sparked you there?
I mean, really, it was probably the last week. I had some deadline issues in terms of, what we needed to put in and what that was going to be and then versus when it was going to come out. So I figured, can kind of get ahead of this Oklahoma thing. And luckily, before the Baylor game, Kellen Sampson and Quannas and Hollis Price were nice enough to talk to me about it, even though they still had 2 games in between then. And then after the Baylor game, Houston's SID, Jeff Conrad, was nice enough to get me time with Kelvin right after that short time to ask him about that. And he was nice enough to answer. So we were able to put things together, but it was a fun piece to write. It was a fun piece to, I think, learn about just how deep the connections go for them. And I think one thing that I think maybe you don't realize, but you do when you learn about it is like, for Kelvin was there for 12 years. His children, Lauren and Kellen, who are now big parts of the program now, were they were kids then, and they both got to graduate out of Oklahoma. And I asked Kellen, just what does Norman mean to him, and he said, Norman is my hometown. That is, he was 9 years old when he got there. He was 24 when he left, and it was pretty obvious to them that, to the Sampson family, especially Kellen and Lauren, that that's kind of their home. And they, of course, they spent their preteen, before preteen, teenage years, college years in that city, and that's pretty rare, I think, for a coach's kid, especially now that you get to sort of stay at one place for a long time and be, have something of a normal life in that sense.
Well, and Norman's an interesting sized place too, in that the normal life aspect. I mean, it is a small college town near Oklahoma City. It kind of offers a bunch of those different normal life aspects, you could argue, where you could walk into Oklahoma City and Kellen might be almost innocuous, right? It just might be hard to break him in a crowd. But then walking around Norman, I mean, his dad is big man on campus, right?
Yeah.
And so that is a cool aspect, I'm sure, for those guys growing up there. This is showing my age because I remember watching those Oklahoma teams. They were darn good. Hollis Price was really, really good. Quannas White, really, really good. But I'm older than you. You don't remember that at all. What had you heard before embarking on this piece about those Oklahoma teams? I mean, do you remember, had you heard anything before you got started?
I mean, I'd heard just since I started covering, this team, I think maybe 15, 16 months ago now, just heard about it, those teams. But, and, I definitely heard of sort of the legend of Hollis Price in college and how good he was. And uh, he seems to still have some of that today because they play these staff games before home games. And, but I honestly, I didn't know much. I knew he had success there. I knew he took them to the Final Four, Elite Eight, all those types of things. But you know, I think the one player that I knew, before I got there or I'd heard of was Eduardo Nahara because he played in the NBA for a little bit.
Right.
So I wasn't super familiar. And then, as the months have gone on, that covering this team and then doing this story just to learn, I mean, they were a powerhouse really in the Big 12 there. And, the way that, they had turned Lloyd Noble Arena into this place where they just were nearly unbeaten, just sort of mirrored how it seems like Fertitta Center's become that same kind of thing. And then learning, from Kellen, what they took from Oklahoma that still translates now, and then what, the mistakes that they made at Oklahoma they didn't make here. They were able to sort of make it a little more seamless in building sort of the foundation here and things like that.
Well, and that Oklahoma team, I mean, they finish, like I said, with a Final Four and Elite Eight under their belt. I had to double check my stats to be sure, but Hollis averaged 19 point something points per game his junior year and 21 his senior in a slower paced college basketball. I mean, it was really, I mean, special guy on special teams. And like you're saying, it kind of set the stage for the program they've built here at Houston altogether. It's interesting because this is the, ultimate homecoming of sorts for Sampson and White and all of them. And then you've got UCF next week, and the regular season's wrapping up with Kansas. But you also have had Jamal Shedd going home to Austin. LJ Cryer returns to Baylor. I've tried to point out that like Waco is not so far from Killeen, which is where Jawan Roberts went to high school. A lot of interesting homecoming moments this season, and this being kind of like the last one. Not of the regular season necessarily, but the last one of your big road trips that you haven't been yet before, right?
Yeah.
In covering this team as closely as you are, you're around them all the time, always at practice, etc. Do those games, like, do you see something different in the guys leading up to those games, like Jamal going to Austin or LJ going to Baylor or any on the staff this week?
I remember seeing it with Jamal in Austin. I mean, just the way he took over that game, and you could kind of tell early on that he was on. But then I remember, I mean, just at this Baylor game, our photographer, our photo editor, Anne, she had taken this great pic, and that I'd seen later, but of the team walking out of the tunnel, and you just sort of see this picture of it, and it's Jamal looking at LJ, and LJ just has his head down, walking forward. And it was just really this great encapsulation of sort of what you could imagine was going through his head. And then, of course, they come out, and he's booed in the introduction, and he's booed every time he touches the ball. But he stayed solid. I mean, he didn't have like an incredible, statistical game, but he had a really solid game. He played great defense, hit clutch free throws, hit big threes when they needed them. And so I think for those guys, you were able to notice that. I think with the staff, I could definitely tell from Hollis. He wanted it because his last game at Lloyd Noble Arena was a loss to Texas. and he told me he really wanted that win and wanted to sort of end on a good note there, considering he is the winningest player in Oklahoma history among all of his other accolades. And you could tell maybe from him. I don't know. I mean, other coaches, Coach Sampson, I think Coach Sampson today in his Zoom, he acknowledged it like, it's not just a normal game. It's, they are human. It's certainly going to be an emotional thing. And, especially with, friends that are there that they get to see, but also friends that, have since passed and, just those sort of memories. But I mean, you think of a consistent person who's just always going to stay focused, and I think Kelvin Sampson is that. And I'm sure it'll be emotional for him. It'll be emotional for the Sampsons and Hollis and Quannas, and also for some of the other staff members. Bobby Champagne, who's part of the program, was Kelvin's assistant at Washington State and then at Oklahoma for a little bit. Bilal Batley, things like that. I mean, a lot of the ties are so deep. But they at the same time, it is a big game just for the standings, for what they're trying to accomplish ultimately. And they'll always say that they're focused on the next game and things like that. But you're a game ahead of anybody in the Big 12 standings. You got 3 games left, so these next 2 games, these next 3 games, any win could effectively clinch it. And so of course they want this win, and it's going to be a tough one.
Well, and Houston likes to push things on defense to the limits. And before we get a little too far, I do want to talk about, if you're the kind of person who likes to push things to the limits, you need to go make sure you're checking out Nissan, because if you're liking to push things further than the average person and you wonder what kind of adventure can be around the corner, our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs capable to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is a perfect drive for both the city and great escapes. Class exclusives, all kinds of Google built-in kind of things. I'm not a techie person, but it looks really cool, I promise. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant does all that work for you. Google Maps, Google Play Store, all built right in to the car for you. The 2024 Rogue is a perfect mid-size crossover for your next adventure. Take Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada to go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. You mentioned Sampson's, talking about being human in this. I think it's interesting in that press conference. I watch after the fact. Obviously, I have a day job and I can't do all the things. But he mentioned that he's gotten older. He's gotten more emotional. That was something to that effect. And I feel like in the couple years I've watched them, and certainly the last 18 months or so, I've been watching them much more closely, doing this every day. I feel like I've seen him get more emotional in the time I've been paying attention to them. And that, like, building up to this is just kind of this, you don't ever want it to end, but it's almost like he's like feeling like he's turning into that older guy. It's just every single game is a little bit more important. Interesting to see on the emotional side. As you mentioned, on the basketball side, this is a game, if you win, could have a big impact on seeding in Big 12 tournament play, seeding in March, where you get to go, who picks where you go, etc. I got to ask, have you done any looking, because I know you cover Houston and are very Houston focused, any looking at what Oklahoma looks like across the court?
To be honest, I haven't done much of a scout, to be quite honest. But I mean, you're getting into a spot where there's a potential where the UCF game could be for the conference, or where the Kansas game could be for the conference. And this game feels like sort of the last jumping off point to this last stretch where you could win, of course, win the conference in your first year there.
And I mean, I've tried to hint at it, but I want people to hear someone else say it so they don't think I'm crazy. How wild, I mean, in your wildest dreams, I tell you, in November when you see the roster on the court for the first time, or 2 years ago when it's announced, whatever it's been now that it's announced Houston's going to be in the Big 12, that Houston will win, or at least at this point in the year have a shot at winning the Big 12 conference regular season outright in its first year. This doesn't just happen.
Yeah, I think it may be hard to believe, not even going back to November, but going back to January after they lost those 2 road games to Iowa State and TCU. It looked like the team had, just was, really got hit in the mouth and hadn't dealt with that really before. And I had a lot of questions on offense and had to do some things, but then they come right back. And I mean, they've really been on a tear since then, aside from the Kansas game, which Kansas at Allen Fieldhouse. I don't, what do you expect?
I mean, no one wins there. Like historically, no one wins there.
Yeah. And I mean, it's really, and doing shows with Ryan of GoCoogs and stuff like that. We had talked about what the expectations going into this. What should the record? What record are you happy with? And I remember Ryan saying a few times, if you go 11-7 in your first year in the Big 12, that's fine. That's good enough to get you a 4 seed, a 3 seed in the tournament, and that's perfectly fine. But now, however many months later, you're sitting here with only 3 losses, 10-1 in your last 11. I've really dominated everybody at home, I guess, except for Cincinnati recently. But that game, I mean, you never really felt like they were going to lose it.
No.
It's really astounding, given just how good the conference is, just how good seemingly every team is, just from 1 to 12. I mean, Oklahoma State and West Virginia are down at the bottom, but I wouldn't say they're awful teams. It's to just come in. I mean, it's hard to put into words just how kind of insane that is. Given what you were going in, what you were dealing with in the American, where you had your teams here and there, but now at the Big 12, it is good team, good team, good team, good team, great team, good team, good team, and be able to just weather that storm perfectly, is astonishing.
No letdown across conference at all. It's funny you said that. I don't know, as Ryan had said 11-7. I remember saying if they go 13-5 is an astronomical success. Like in my head, I was like 13-5 in conference play. That's roughly half your road games and all your home games. That may win the whole conference, man. Like and now if you told me today, we're recording on Thursday, February 29th. If you told me today that they finished at 13-5 and lost 2 of the next 3, I'd be like, man, we messed up somewhere. That's just how things have changed with the expectations shifting as they do. Wild how things shift like that. All right, so Starns and I are breaking down this game. We're going to tell you more about it in a moment. But first, if you're trying to make sports a little more interesting between now and then, or looking for ways to get in on the action this weekend, go get buckets with our partners at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets back by winning any $5 bets. Put down $5 bet and get $150 back if that bet hits. They have all kinds of quick bets and same game parlays and stuff like that on the NBA side. In college, they also follow each and every game, so make sure you're checking it out for getting ready for March Madness. Make sure you're paying attention to what those lines are and where they move. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to shoot your shot. Visit FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. You're with them every day. Their mindset at this point in the year, they know they have a bunch of big things on the horizon in the very near future. But Sampson runs a program that's very much, we have the present moment in front of us. What's the vibe like? Are there even whispers, or are they actually as focused as Sampson would want them to be?
I I can imagine they're as focused as Kelvin would want them to be. I mean, this, maybe the conference is new to them itself, but this position, this ranking, all of this is not new. Being on the verge of winning a conference, they've done that however many of the last 5 years, however many times. Um, being ranked number one, they were there last year. So they know what it is. I think the main thing for them, and I think a concern is health. You lost Terrence Arsenault in December, and they've done fine without him. But as the years gone on, there's so many spots you're like, oh, you'd love to have him right here. You'd love to have him right here. And then you lose Ramon Walker to this day, last week, in practice, who is just a guy who is just going to come up big, who just comes up big in spots, makes big rebounds, makes big hustle plays, injects energy into the team. And, his minutes or his stats don't pop out at you, but he's a big part of, who they are. He's an identity guy. He's what they call a culture guy. That's a big deal. And then you have JoJo, who didn't play much of last game with a right ankle injury. And then you have Jawan, who's been dealing with his knee all year. And then, just whatever lingering other injuries that a team accumulates throughout a year. I think they want to enter March above anything else. Of course, they want those accolades, but they want to enter March healthy and, able to be their best selves. Because last year, they were worn down, I think, to an extent. And then Marcus Sasser goes down, and that really sort of derails everything. And then Jarris Walker hurts his elbow in the Miami game. Jamal Shedd has a nagging knee injury through March. I think they want to avoid that again.
Well, and with Locked On, every school is represented, so you hear all the trash talk all the time and whatever. I have to constantly remind people, like, Jamal Shedd was a shell of himself at that point, right? Like he has that fifth gear that other guys don't have, and he couldn't get past third gear, let alone to fifth. Anyway, like you said, that's the goal, is to not be there. You've already lost a couple guys for the year, so you're just trying to get as healthy as you can by then. On your way out, Starns, you have a prediction for this weekend, and then obviously also tell people where they can find you, the article you just wrote for the Daily Cougar about homecoming for Sampson, and other work you're doing. Do a bunch of different stuff in a bunch of different places.
Yeah. Real quickly, prediction. I think all of these road games that U of H has played, they've been able to weather the home run, weather the storm in terms of whether they come back, U of H takes the lead and then the other team makes the run. They've been able to do that and then make the plays late. And I would probably, I think I'm going to predict a similar thing. I think it'll be a close game, but I think U of H is going to be able to, whether those second half runs with the crowd behind the home team, and then make the plays down the stretch to win it, and set up two big final games. But as for what we've got going on, of course we got Cats Aftershot, Cougar Afterthought Show, Cats, after these games at GoCoogs, and then at the Cougar we've got a lot going on. We just had the My Oklahoma story come out, but we've also got some stories just about other sports that I think are worth reading. Morgan Yonda, the volleyball star, now high jumping for the track team. We got a story about that. You got Davion Wilson, the star hurdler, who just won the Big 12 championship in the 60-meter hurdle with the school record time. We've got some more about him, and just it's going to get, especially as March comes along and now spring football, there's going to be a lot of fun stuff coming out from us. And so please follow, the Daily Cougar and the Cougar Sports and things like that.
It's a fun time to be a Cougar. A lot of good stuff happening on campus. Football program with big changes. The track program looking to have a good start to the spring. Baseball's at Minute Maid this weekend. I mean, it's a fun time to be a Coug. Thank you again, Starns. That's Starns Leland on, I guess the X is there, so we got to call it X. But Starns Leland on whatever we want to call it. Editor of the sports editor of the Daily Cougar and part of GoCoogs.com. Thanks for coming on today, Starns.
Thank you for having me.
Go Cougs.